Elon Musk confronts a rude talk show host after being insulted. When the host tries to mock him with a controversial question, Elon's response shuts everyone up. "You won't believe what happens next." The stage lights burned brightly, illuminating the polished desk where the host sat, leaning forward with a smirk that barely hid his true intentions. The audience, a mix of admirers and skeptics, settled in, their eyes darting between him and the man seated across from him, Elon Musk. The energy in the room was electric, buzzing with the kind of tension that only comes before something explosive. Millions were watching from their homes, expecting a simple interview. But those who knew this host, who had seen how he cornered, mocked and humiliated guests in the past, understood what was really happening. This wasn't an interview. It was an ambush. Elon Musk sat calmly, hands resting on the armrests of his chair. He had faced skeptics before, weathered criticism from the media, politicians, and even Wall Street. He wasn't one to flinch easily. But tonight, he wasn't just up against a journalist. He was up against a master of manipulation, someone who thrived on controversy and spectacle. The host cleared his throat, his smirk widening. "So, Elon," he began, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "tell me, when exactly did you decide you wanted to be the world's richest supervillain?" The audience chuckled. Some laughed out of amusement, others because they knew exactly what the host was trying to do. But Musk, he didn't laugh. He didn't frown. He simply smiled. What happened next would leave the entire room speechless. The host was no stranger to controversy. For years, he had built his career on confrontational interviews, priding himself on being the one who could make even the most powerful figures stumble. His style wasn't about seeking truth. It was about creating a spectacle, a moment that would go viral, a clip that would dominate headlines. He had done it before. He had pushed politicians into angry outbursts, had celebrities storming off his set, had CEOs breaking into nervous stammers as he twisted their words. And now, sitting across from him was Elon Musk, the biggest fish he had ever tried to catch. The audience could feel it. This wasn't going to be a casual conversation about technology and innovation. This was a setup. The host had come prepared, armed with a list of pointed, mocking questions, ready to turn Musk into a joke. He knew that the billionaire had his fair share of supporters, but he also knew that Musk had critics, people who saw him as reckless, arrogant, even dangerous. That was his audience. Musk's invitation to the show had been framed as a discussion about the future of AI, space travel, and free speech. But the moment he sat down, it was clear this wasn't about his work. It was about him. The camera zoomed in. The host adjusted his tie, tilting his head slightly, preparing for his next move. "You've made quite a name for yourself, Elon," he said smoothly, tapping his pen against the desk. "Some call you a genius. Others say you're just a rich guy who got lucky. Which one is it?" A murmur ran through the audience. The trap had been set. But what the host didn't realize was that he wasn't dealing with just any billionaire. He was dealing with Elon Musk. And Elon wasn't about to let himself be played. The audience chuckled at the host's question, waiting to see how Musk would react. But Elon didn't flinch. He sat there, calm and composed, his expression unreadable. If the host had expected an immediate reaction, a defensive response, he wasn't going to get one. Instead, Musk simply smiled and tilted his head slightly. "I think results speak for themselves," he said, his tone even. "Tesla, SpaceX, Starlink, none of those exist because of luck." The response was direct, logical, but the host wasn't interested in logic. He wanted entertainment. He let out a forced laugh, shaking his head. Right, he said, waving a hand. "But let's be honest, Elon. Some people think you're more interested in, I don't know, playing billionaire superhero than actually helping people." Musk's fingers tapped lightly on the armrest of his chair, but his face remained neutral. The host, sensing an opening, pushed further. I mean, you're sending rockets to Mars, buying social media companies and building robots. But at the end of the day, can we really call that changing the world? Or is it just a very, very expensive hobby? A few nervous laughs rippled through the audience. The host leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a self-satisfied smirk on his face. This was his strategy, mock Musk just enough to make him seem ridiculous. The camera zoomed in on Musk. He blinked, considering his response. "So, let me get this straight," Musk said finally, his voice slow, deliberate. "Creating sustainable energy, making space exploration possible, and giving people internet in remote areas. That's just a hobby." The audience shifted, a few heads nodding. Musk wasn't being defensive. He wasn't angry. He was turning the question back on the host. The host, caught off guard, let out an awkward chuckle. "Well, when you put it like that," he muttered. But Musk wasn't done. He leaned forward slightly. "Tell me, what have you built?" The room went silent. The host's smirk faltered. And for the first time, it was Musk who had control of the conversation. The host's smirk twitched, but he recovered quickly. He wasn't going to let Musk take control of the conversation that easily. He straightened in his chair, clearing his throat before flashing the audience a knowing look. Okay, he said, lifting his hands in mock surrender. "I'll admit you've done some impressive things." Musk simply nodded, waiting. The host leaned forward again, his tone shifting. "But let's talk about the other side of it, shall we?" he said, his voice dripping with amusement. "You've been called a genius, sure, but you've also been called reckless, irresponsible, even dangerous." The audience murmured. Here it was, the moment they had been waiting for. The host didn't pause. He was going in for the kill. "Some people say you're not an innovator. You're just a rich guy playing with expensive toys." He let the word settle before adding with a smirk, "A real-life Tony Stark, minus the charisma." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Some found it funny. Others just watched, waiting to see what Musk would do. Still, Musk remained composed. He didn't shift in his seat. He didn't blink. The host took that as encouragement. He decided to push even further. "I mean, come on, Elon," he said, tilting his head. "You say you care about the future of humanity, but you're firing rockets into space instead of helping people here on Earth. Tell me, do you even care about the average person?" A hush fell over the room. The question was more than just provocative. It was designed to mock him, to frame him as out of touch, as someone who had lost sight of reality. The camera zoomed in on Musk. The audience waited. The host sat back, satisfied, thinking he had landed the knockout punch. But what happened next was something no one expected. Musk didn't react with anger. He didn't roll his eyes, scoff, or fire back with sarcasm. Instead, he simply smiled. It wasn't forced or bitter. It was the kind of smile that comes when you see straight through someone's game. Then, Musk leaned forward, met the host's gaze, and spoke. "That's an interesting question," he said smoothly. "But let me ask you this. Do you?" The host's expression flickered with confusion. "Do I what?" Musk's smile didn't waver. "Do you care about the average person?" The laughter stopped. The audience went silent. The host had walked straight into his own trap. For a second, the host just sat there, blinking. He had expected Musk to squirm, to fumble for an answer, to defend himself. But this wasn't in the script. The audience could feel the shift. Moments ago they had been laughing along with the host, enjoying the spectacle. Now, the energy in the room was different. The tension had flipped, and suddenly it was the host who looked like he had something to prove. He let out a forced chuckle, shaking his head. "What do you mean, do I care?" he asked, trying to keep his voice light, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. Musk didn't look away. "You just asked me if I care about the average person," he said, his voice even calm. "So I'm asking, do you?" The host's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being on this side of the conversation. Normally, he was the one putting guests on the spot, pressing them with uncomfortable questions. But now, he was the one under the microscope. He shifted in his chair. "Well, of course I do," he said quickly, waving a hand. "I mean, my job is to ask tough questions, to challenge powerful people like you." Musk raised an eyebrow. "And what does that do for the average person?" The audience was completely silent now. Some of them leaned forward, intrigued. Others exchanged glances, sensing that this interview had taken a turn no one had expected. The host opened his mouth, but for the first time that night, he didn't seem to have an answer. Musk sat back, folding his hands together. "See, that's the problem," he said. "It's easy to sit here and criticize, to mock, to point fingers, but the real question is, are you actually doing anything to help?" The host's lips pressed into a thin line. The tables had turned, and everyone in the room knew it. The host's fingers curled around the edge of his desk, his once playful smirk tightening into something more forced. He had spent years controlling conversations, steering them exactly where he wanted them to go. But now, for the first time in a long time, he wasn't in control. Musk tilted his head slightly, studying him. "You ask me if I care about the average person," he said. "But let's be honest. What do you actually want from this conversation?" The host let out a short laugh, though it lacked its earlier confidence. "I want to have a discussion," he said, shrugging. "That's what this show is about. Tough conversations." Musk nodded slowly, then glanced toward the cameras. "Right. But let's be clear. This isn't really about conversation, is it?" A murmur rippled through the audience. The host's eyes flickered, sensing the shift in the room. Musk wasn't playing defense. He was playing offense. "Media thrives on controversy," Musk continued, his voice measured. "You don't want real answers. You want sound bites, clicks, outrage, because that's what keeps people watching." The audience was no longer laughing. They were listening, really listening. The host opened his mouth to interrupt, but Musk wasn't finished. He gestured slightly, his tone still calm, but his words sharp. "Let's take your question. You ask if I care about the average person, but do you ever ask that to politicians, to media executives, to the corporations funding your show?" The host's jaw tightened. He knew exactly what Musk was doing, and worse, so did the audience. Musk leaned forward slightly. "The truth is, it's easy to sit in a chair and criticize people actually trying to build something. It's easy to laugh at ideas you don't understand. But tell me, when was the last time you created something, built something, took a real risk?" Silence. The host shifted, but this time he had nowhere to go. Musk let the moment stretch just long enough. Then finally he sat back and shrugged. "That's the difference between us. I don't waste time tearing people down. I build." A single clap rang out from the audience, then another and another, until suddenly the entire room was applauding. The host swallowed hard. He had just lost control of his own show. The applause echoed through the studio, a slow ripple turning into a wave. The host's smile faltered, his grip tightening around the edges of his desk. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. For years he had controlled the tempo, cutting guests off at just the right moment, steering the conversation toward controversy. But now Musk had flipped the script. The billionaire wasn't stammering, he wasn't backtracking, he was winning. The host forced out a laugh, raising his hands in an attempt to regain control. All right, he said, the edges of his voice tight. "Let's not get carried away here." But the audience wasn't laughing anymore. They weren't watching Musk try to defend himself. They were watching him scramble. He cleared his throat, pushing forward. "Look, Elon, I'm just asking the questions people want answers to." Musk tilted his head, his expression still calm. No, you're asking questions designed to get a reaction. The audience murmured again. The host was running out of room to move. Desperate to shift the momentum, he grabbed onto something familiar: sarcasm. So, what? You think the media is out to get you? He scoffed, shaking his head. Come on, Elon. You're a billionaire. How tough can life really be? Musk exhaled sharply, almost a laugh, but not quite. He leaned forward, locking eyes with the host. It's not about me, he said. It's about how people like you shape what the world believes. You don't ask questions to find the truth. You ask them to tell people what to think. The host's smirk disappeared. Musk let the silence stretch for a moment. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he asked, "What happens when people stop believing you?" The audience fell completely silent. For the first time in his career, the host had no comeback. The air in the studio was thick with tension. The audience, once lively and engaged, now sat frozen, waiting to see what would happen next. The host shifted in his chair, forcing a tight-lipped smile, but the cracks were showing. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was real. Elon Musk remained still, his hands clasped together, his expression unreadable. Then, after a beat of silence, he leaned forward slightly, his voice low but firm. "You invited me here to mock me," he said. "But I didn't come here to entertain you." The host's fingers twitched. He let out a forced chuckle, trying to keep the mood light. "Elon, come on. This is all just conversation, right?" Musk didn't break eye contact. "No," he said simply. "This is the problem." The room felt smaller, the weight of his words pressing against the walls. The audience could feel it, the shift, the power dynamic completely reversing. Musk exhaled, shaking his head slightly. "People like you sit behind desks and cameras, laughing at the people who actually try to build something. You don't take risks, you don't create, you criticize, and you think that makes you important." The host opened his mouth, but nothing came out. There was no witty comeback this time. Musk let his words settle before delivering the final blow. "I came here to talk about the future, but you? You just wanted a headline." He smirked, leaning back. "Well, there's your headline." Silence. Then someone in the audience clapped, then another, and another, until the entire room was on its feet, applauding. And at that moment, it was clear. The host hadn't just lost the argument, he had lost the audience. The applause thundered through the studio, shaking the very foundation of the show's carefully crafted illusion. The host sat there, motionless, his confident demeanor now a distant memory. This was supposed to be his moment. He was supposed to be the one in control, the one who made headlines. But now, the story had changed. Elon Musk didn't bask in the applause. He didn't need to. He had said what needed to be said, and the world had heard him. The moment the interview ended, clips of Musk's response spread like wildfire. Social media exploded. Some called it one of the greatest talk show takedowns in history. Others saw it as a wake-up call, a turning point in how people viewed the media. News outlets scrambled to spin the story. Some praised Musk for standing up against media bias and manufactured outrage. Others twisted the narrative, claiming he had been overly defensive, too combative. But no matter how they framed it, one thing was clear: Musk had won. And it wasn't just about winning an argument. It was about shifting the conversation. People began questioning what they consumed, how narratives were shaped, and who really had control over public perception. Musk had walked into that studio as a guest. He had walked out as the man who changed the rules. And as the host sat there, staring at his desk long after Musk had left, he knew it too. Because for the first time in his career, he hadn't just lost an interview. He had lost his audience.